So, from Progressa, we have Ali Prizard, CEO and founder. From Sampler, founder and CEO, Marie Chevy. Mark Organ, founder and CEO of Influitive, and Michael Litt from Vidyard. So I believe everyone has the ability to ask questions. I get to just pull down on this iPad and see when they come up, so please submit them. But why don't we just jump right in, maybe with yourself, Marie, to start. We're going to hit on a few things: process, startup versus scale up, and how sales change between those. How do you manage relationship in B2B versus sort of consumer? Leadership and organization, how organizations go, and maybe we'll finish off with some more time. So Marie, how do you manage sort of moving the process from spending time educating your customers on what it is you do versus actually driving to closure of a sale? And how do you know when to really invest in steaming it forward versus like pulling out and saving your time?
So just maybe for context for everybody, so Sampler, we help consumer packaged good companies measure their product sampling activity. So super old industry that really relies heavily on people just giving out samples on street corners without any way of measuring exactly who's getting the sample and whether it converts to a sale. So we're going into these large enterprise customers and we're saying, hey, the way you've been doing something is completely wrong and you should start thinking about measuring. You should start thinking about the data that you could gather from these samples. So there is quite a bit of education in the process, education about kind of our vision towards digitizing that experience. And it's still a huge, important aspect of our business still today. So I think we can't get away with just walking in and expecting a sale. We still have to do a lot of education.
And how does that sort of change for yourself, Ali, as you sort of look to things in your world?
Sure, yeah. So for everybody's benefit, Progressa is a consumer finance business, but I'm up here because all of our customer acquisition comes from enterprise business. So we're a B2B to C acquisition model. And very similar, sort of sales cycle for us, where we have to focus on big enterprise, and a lot of it is an education process. So where we do is we are really focused on taking a very traditionally negative space, which is the collection space in Canada. All big enterprise in Canada has a collections department, and what we're trying to do is educate them and get them to make it, try to turn it into a positive. That's a bit of a sales process, but our software engine allows us to execute on that vision. And it's a bit of a sales process. I mean, we're 6 to 12 months each time to onload a new enterprise partner.
And maybe for yourself, Mark, how do you sort of go ahead and turn or leverage sort of not just your people, but other technology or other things to support the sale from a B2B perspective and track it through that sort of 6 to 12 month life cycle?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So you probably heard ABC, right? Always be closing. And in the sales process, you're always trying to close the prospect to the next stage of the process. It's not like necessarily you're trying to cram a big sale down the prospect's throat right in the first meeting, but you're trying to buy the next stage of the process. So we use, it's like an upfront contract is what we call it, right? So when we meet a prospect, we say like this is the process by which you're going to get educated, and by the end of this process, you will agree to buy our product. And they sort of sign off on that. And believe it or not, that's actually, prospects actually really like that. They like having an efficient buying process. They don't want to waste their time in terms of going through an endless buying process. So that's one way of sort of bridging the gap of providing a sort of roadmap for the buyer and saying this is the process by which it will work. You're also always educating as a salesperson. I mean, and a lot of that education these days doesn't always happen from you as a salesperson. A lot of times it's your customers that are doing that, which is a big part of what we're all about in Influitive. If you guys don't know us, we believe that the best sales and marketing that you could do is actually done by our customers. That's who they want to hear from. So, a great salesperson is leveraging their customers to be doing that education while the salesperson is orchestrating that process and moving through to closure efficiently. So that's kind of, for me, the balance between education and closing. It kind of happens all the way along.
So we jump right into sort of the sale itself, Michael. Maybe you can sort of talk about how you actually generate, leads, be it through social or other avenues to actually start to go ahead and engage with prospects or opportunities.
So we're going to work backwards in the process a little bit. Got it.
Jump back a bit, yeah.
Cool. No, I think that's really relevant, especially given the audience. So when we started, when you build software to solve a problem that you perceive in the market, it's often case that your customers who you're solving the problem for or your prospects don't even know you exist, and they might not even know that they have the problem you're solving, which I think is why we all talk about education. And education is really about category creation. And so we're, for reference, Vidyard is a video experience platform. So we help companies communicate with video, whether they're marketing, selling, or training internally. We help support that initiative. We've got a whole bunch of products to do that. We went to Y Combinator in 2011, and we built our software as an undergraduate thesis project from the University of Waterloo. And of course, you end up having no customers once you build that product, and so you have to find who is going to buy, and you have to identify those propensity triggers that are going to eliminate a huge volume of potential leads, right? Because a company like us, and probably a lot of you in the audience, you could technically sell to every business in the planet if you're B2B, or potentially every consumer, but you're going to bang your head on a lot of walls through that process of trying to find that initial target market that is much more willing and closer to the purchase process than the rest of the planet would be. And so what we did was we built a crawler that scanned the DMOZ, which is a directory of businesses and websites. It's kind of legacy. I wouldn't use it today. And there was something like 1.8 million websites listed in the DMOZ that we could classify as B2B companies, which was our initial target. And then we crawled every single one of those websites to see if they had videos embedded on their homepage or video platform. So if they were using YouTube or Vimeo or some other product, we would classify those businesses. If we found a video on the homepage, we would look at the sitemap and find how many videos existed across the entire website. And then we'd look on LinkedIn and Crunchbase and try to classify the business in terms of its size. And then we ended up with a list of about 85,000 companies. And it took this crawler about a week and a half to roll through the entire database. And 85,000 companies is still way too many companies. And so every day I would wake up and I would pull this list, and I would try to query the list to get about 100 businesses that I thought were classified in a specific industry or vertical or segment that I hadn't tried talking to as of yet. And then once I picked those companies, I'd send that list on Odesk to someone in Manila who would find the key contacts in that business. That happened while I was sleeping and on Pacific Standard Time, and when I wake up, I would have these 100 businesses with probably 300 contacts that I would roll through for the day, and I would finish my day, find the next list of 100. Did that for 6 months straight, and probably tried to contact over 25,000 people in that period. So that's how we found our initial customers to eventually try to educate them. And for what it's worth, the conversion rate on that first 25,000 was abysmally low. We ended up with about 200 customers paying us like $5 a month from that list. So the beautiful thing about that process, though, as a side note, as it involves building your company, is that the feedback and perspective I got from all those conversations developed our roadmap and helped us understand what we need to educate the customers on as we started to scale the team and replace me with other humans so that we could scale that entire initiative.
That's amazing. So we sort of hit on sort of lead gen, automation, and actually driving out some of the first couple of customers. And I think, Marie, you might have a story around how you sort of engaged, some different organizations and how you, interact with, call it, their integration groups or different customer people within your clients to help, sponsor and drive you through.
Yeah, for sure. So we sell into consumer packaged good companies, but a lot of industries right now are investing heavily into innovation. So I want to encourage you to see whether your industry has some hackathon or some competitions or innovation programs, because Samplers probably participated in 6 and won 5, and it's just awesome because you have the entire organization just in front of you, and you get to do a pitch to 30 brands at once. And ultimately, those innovation competitions are all about finding things that they need that they don't have time to develop in house. So, and sometimes they're for PR, and that's okay too because you'll still find customers. But they've been really, really good for us. And ultimately, the toughest part about selling to enterprise is getting through procurement, as you can surely all relate. So a lot of these innovation programs will then give you like kind of a pass through for procurement, or at least like your first pilot project. And once you have the pilot project, then it's a lot easier to get through procurement. So check it out.
Did you ever have a challenge with the IT coming back and saying, we can build it, you don't need anybody else's help?
Yeah,
that would be number 2 on the list of challenges that you run into after procurement.
Yeah, to be honest, no, like not that much. And I think like the answer for that would like why your product is something they can't think about or like work on themselves. And I always say like we are like a team of 16 people thinking about product sampling 12 hours a day. Like if you want to go ahead and do that yourself, you can.
Yeah, no, we got a bit of that. We sometimes get that from Canadian prospects and from companies in India is where we see that.
We need to be careful because our targets are very large enterprise. So they're banks, credit card companies, and telecoms. They have large innovation groups, and they're pretty smart people, and they have large fintech departments. So early mistakes for our business, sort of walking in guns blazing into those meetings, saying we can, we're a big data company and we have more data and we're really good at analyzing it. Fast forward, 3.5 years, and we sort of walk in a lot more. We're confident, but we're not really, taking the approach that we know more than them.
The saying that's worked for me is your back office is our front office, right? So, and a great way to deal with this sort of objection, like actually most objections is through stories, right? So let me tell you about the time when, MongoDB, they thought they had a better advocate marketing solution than us, which actually they did at the time we first talked to them, because it's their business. But, they had 7 full-time people and working on this solution. And when the marketers needed to have a more advanced, rev, of course, the engineers were busy doing other things. They weren't there to take care of the product. You don't want that happening to you, right? So, the best advice I can give you on that, and really most other objections, is use stories. Try to catalog all the different stories you need from customers and essentially use those to handle your objection, or even get them to do the talking for you. It's even more effective.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So we'll take a question from the audience. So that's new to you guys. Can you share some insights and learnings when you failed? Of course, it's always the negative, and what that insight would be and what you learned from it.
I'll give the same example I just gave really quickly. In the early days, we were sort of guns blazing, walking into large enterprise with a very small team. Certainly, we had some track record, but I don't think we were putting ourselves quite in the enterprise's shoes when we walked into those meetings. Specifically, I'll speak to telecoms, very sort of NPS-focused organizations, very customer-centric organizations. You think about Rogers, TELUS, and Bell. They care more about sort of their customers and customer service than one can imagine. And so when I walk into those meetings, 3 years ago, and I'm focused on sort of credit adjudication and I can get you money back on your collections enhancement, that's not what's going through their mind. We had to refine our sales approach. They really only care about their customer and sort of how are they perceived by their customers. So today, as we're unloading these enterprises as partners, really we're predominantly focused on how are we going to make life good for your customers, and how's your NPS going to improve.
So as you guys have evolved, and maybe you hit on this earlier, Michael, around the $5 per customer per month, how have you gone ahead and identified how to price your product, and how's that pricing model evolved from sort of startup to scale up and as you sort of grow?
Yeah, I think pricing is a moving target. It's never something static. You can never just sit and say, yes, our pricing is nailed. The way we handled that is by removing pricing from our website, which allowed us to test various pricing models. The reality is you're going to have competitors that pop up and unfortunately damage the entire ecosystem by just trying to price you to zero. That's commodity marketplace tactics. That's going to exist in every single industry. we had a competitor that was already in market, and when we launched, we just undercut their pricing. We did that to them, then they undercut our pricing, and then we undercut their pricing, and they undercut our pricing, and pretty soon it was very difficult to see how we were actually going to build a business based off of this pricing, especially given their head start in terms of brand equity, zero cost leads from the brand equity and market, et cetera. And so we just removed pricing altogether and went into a different market. And we sat in that market for 2 years before they realized that we were even being successful in that market. And then they went in that market, and the whole thing started all over again. Today, we have segmentation in our company. So we have an SME, a mid-market, a large enterprise, and a key accounts team. We also sell into 4 different aspects of the business: marketing teams, sales teams, internal communications teams, and support and services. And every single one of those SKUs and every single one of those segments has a different pricing model, which is based on what we think that organization is willing to pay us to solve that problem. And if it's a cost center or a revenue center, other inputs are things like if you're selling into the sales wallet, you might have access to about $500 per rep in that business, and Salesforce already owns 90% of that. And so if you try to sell something for $50 a rep, you're always going to get benchmarked against the cost of Salesforce CRM. So there are so many implicit variables to consider when pricing. Just understand that it's never done. The most important thing, though, is that when you do talk to customers and it gets to pricing, you have to own that conversation. And that was the most difficult thing for me to learn as an engineer. I would always kind of waffle on pricing, and I'd be confident on everything else. And when it got to that part of the discussion, I'd kind of squeak out an answer. And 9 times out of 10, you're probably pricing it too low.
Yeah, I think there's so much wisdom in what Michael just told you. I think the most important job for really,
Oh.
you've learned a lot, man.
I learned a lot of it from Mark.
Yeah, not just,
Eloqua was like our that was the market that we succeeded in initially. So thank you for building that amazing company.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's a lot of wisdom there. I think the most important job for you guys as founders is to understand the mental model of your users and customers, and those customers and users exist in different segments, right? So I think, for example, Michael going out and doing all this lead gen in the early days, it wasn't just because he couldn't afford a BDR. It's because he wanted to learn about how his prospects thought maybe he couldn't afford a BDR. But it had probably the bigger benefit wasn't just generating leads, right? It was understanding the way that people thought about video marketing and how they break out into segments. And those different segments have different needs with respect to features in your product, and pricing is just another feature. It's an important one, right? But it's just another feature. So by understanding a lot more about, for example, you sell into salespeople. Sales leaders have a different mental model for how they think about video than marketing leaders do. And they want to buy differently. They have a different process. So by uncovering that process and by going really deep on it, then you're able to create a solution that's very competitive. There's no one else who's going to have deeper knowledge than you have. So I think that's our job. Our job is to understand the mental model of our users and customers better than anybody else so that we can be contrarian, right? Be contrarian. You guys know what that means, be contrarian? It means that everyone else tells you you're crazy or stupid, but you know that you're not because you've done the work, right? You've done the research. And that's how you make real money. That's how you make the big money, either as an entrepreneur or investor, where everyone else is running one way. No one's ever going to pay $3,000 a month for video software. You must be nuts. Well, actually, they do. They pay more than that, right? Why? Because Michael figured that out. And same thing with when so he let the cat out of the bag. I used to run a company called Eloqua before. We sold our software for like 8 times more than anybody else did. But I think it's because we had a better understanding of the way people thought about marketing. And so our pitch was better, messaging was better, pricing was razor sharp, different from the way everyone else did. And the reason why I think 98% of entrepreneurs fail is because they're lazy. They don't do the work. They do the work maybe they want to do, but they don't actually do the important work of getting out of the office and spending time with real people and overcoming their shyness. And I think that's the most important work that you guys can do. And it's where I spend a lot of my time as founder CEO.
And one thing maybe to add to that, so obviously we're talking a lot about talking to your customers about what your pricing should be, but don't forget how much it costs to run your business, because I think that's one thing that you could get pressure on. But like you have to go back to that, and like, am I actually building something scalable, and not maybe so that your pricing will be too high, but maybe it'll help you think critically about some of the features you might not need in order to make the sale, or things like that. So we do a lot of back and forth on that, because we came to market with something that had all the bells and whistles, and maybe our pricing wasn't necessarily in place. And by removing a couple bells and whistles and kind of moving with the trends of the market, we're able now to be more competitive.
So this is actually really good.
You're surprised.
I know, this is awesome.
That pricing thing's be boring.
I know.
Well, there's a lot of magic in that pricing stuff.
Well, that sort of pays all the bills. Yeah. So, we sort of hit on this, and you maybe hit on this a little bit, Mark, earlier, to follow on your sort of MongoDB, sort of comment. One of the questions from the audience is, when you know that you have certain aspects of your product that aren't as strong as your competitor, and they're already in there, or they're pitching as well, how do you sort of go ahead and focus, the customer away from that and towards what you do best?
Yeah. Well, I'll go back again to understanding that mental model of the prospect, right? Understanding what it is they value. And hopefully there's an alignment with what they value and what you have to offer. Maybe you're not going to be as scalable as the competition, but maybe that's not important to your buyer. Maybe what's really important is the fact that you're very service oriented. You could turn on a dime, that you have tremendous depth instead of breadth, as an example. That actually was Eloqua's advantage in the early days. We had competitors that could scale much more, but we went much more deep on every single user. So it's just spinning that to your advantage, then asking really good questions, right? So, are you trying to accomplish this goal? Why are you trying to accomplish it? Well, this is, that product is great for this. And by the way, you never, ever criticize your competition. You know that, right? Don't criticize your competition. You damn them with faint praise, right? So you say, that is a wonderful company full of fine people. And if you want to accomplish X, Y, Z, it is amazing. But for what you want to do, you should really go take a look at our product.
This totally resonates with me. I love it. I love it. We're 1/1000th the size of the telecoms. So this is, he's speaking my language. I cannot walk into those conversations and say anything but how he's describing it. I'll just agree with Mark. Be a contrarian. I think walk into those meetings and wow them with something that they weren't expecting. We're a consumer finance business. We're very focused on sort of disrupting a traditionally negative space. But when I walk in there and just focus on all the positives, they don't know what hit them. I literally have them at hello. The pitch is being so refined now that they just weren't expecting it.
There's a product management analogy here, which I think is just a real quick one, which is customers will tell you what they want until they're like blue in the face, but it is your job as the contrarian entrepreneur, and I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it, to take all that information and actually infer what they need. And that is what you do, and that's how you build a scalable business. Because if you built everything everybody wanted, you would sell your roadmap, and you would never build the one thing that absolutely everybody needed. So be aware of that, but you have to own that position, and that's why people buy from you, because you skated to where the puck is. You have identified what their need is before they have even experienced the pain.
Wow, we've done Jerry Maguire and Wayne Gretzky all in one.
Show me the money.
We need one more for the trifecta. So maybe for you, Marie, how much has sort of existing customer brand, especially in something like CPG where you reside, impact and help you sort of facilitate or accelerate a sale into the next customer?
So existing customers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've talked a bit about it. They're your largest advocates, right? Brands, when you're talking to them, or your customers want to know how you were successful with somebody else, and certainly that means building case studies in multiple verticals and having different types of stories for all of your key benefits. And you have to take the time and to stop after a program and actually analyze that and think about it and think about how you're going to tell that story. It's going to be incredibly valuable for you. So I think for us that's been huge, and involving them in that success. Like, no, everybody, especially if you're selling it to large enterprise, you could probably assume that 90% of people are bored with their job, and like they're really exciting about your hot new startup, or they're really excited about your like big mission, and they want to be part of it. Like, one of my customers like has been involved in building case studies for us, has been involved in helping us, but he also helped my fiance propose to me. Like, this is like, he's like, we've come that close. And this is the type
Give that
of
guy a discount.
yeah, like he scheduled a fake meeting and I showed up and my fiance was there. But like that's like when you really end up like building advocates for you, and you should really invest in that for sure.
Just another you had me at hello moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, focusing on, so again, we're unloading these consumers from enterprise, and hopefully we do our jobs and fix these consumers. Very recently we really started to get deep into the data on how are these consumers performing, and I think this is what's now allowed us to propel the conversations with enterprise, because we have those NPS scores, we have those tens of thousands of sort of customers that are getting back on their feet, and now I can walk in and sort of show that and demonstrate that. So I think that's what's really allowed us to propel at this point.
So we spent a lot of time speaking outward. How do you engage customers? Now it's around internally in the team. Sort of how have you gone ahead and either started building a sales team, going from yourselves as the founders to giving up some control? How have you found those people, and how have you sort of structured as you've grown? Maybe each one of you can sort of go through and give us a bit of story about that.
I'm passionate about this, and I'm actually just going through this again as we've expanded to Europe and having to figure out how we're going to go there. So your first rep, or better said, actually your first pair of reps, I really believe in hiring reps in pairs, as well as customer service people in pairs nowadays. Otherwise, if you hire one and it's not working, you don't know why, right? You're not running a controlled experiment. Not that hiring two is necessarily a controlled experiment, but at least you're getting some data. So it's better than nothing. So I believe those first pair of reps are really special and different. They're not, they almost should have a special title. I just call them number one and number two. And they're really a lot more entrepreneurial. And the reason why is they're doing the job that you used to do, hopefully, not long ago. I really believe the founder should be out there in the market. If it's a B2B enterprise thing, winning the first, anywhere between 2 to 10 sales. We hired our first pair of sales reps once I won the first 10 accounts. And then it was time to bring someone in. And the reason why is their job isn't just to sell, right? Their job is also to learn. So my first pair of sales reps both had tried to start businesses before, so were interested in entrepreneurship. They were really smart, right? So they weren't just reps that could like follow a process. But they were curious and again, very entrepreneurial. And probably the kind of people that are never going to be like fire-breathing dragons that are going to sell $2 or $3 million a year of software for you. You're going to hire those later, like once you're successful. Because you need those people who are going to come back to you and say, you'll never believe what I learned today, right? I learned that this pitch works in this way, and that means it means X. So we should be maybe looking to build this feature in order to get access to this market. Like, you need somebody to be able to tell you that. I think once you get to like 10 reps or so, then you can start to really think about scaling, and then you're hiring more of what's the proverbial coin-operated sales reps, people who really care about making money, and less focused on culture and learning and development and that sort of thing. But yeah, those early reps are super important.
We did it just slightly differently, and not to say that that's wrong. I love the idea of the sales petri dish. The way we did it was, and just based on the economics of our business, first-time founder didn't have the opportunity to raise money until we had that traction. Once I had built that cadence of contacting companies and bringing them through a process and ultimately closing them, the first hire we made was the person that was doing that outbound calling. And same story in that they have to learn, because those people are inevitably going to be a part of your product management team that develops your roadmap based on those conversations. But they would go out, prospect, set up meetings that I would then close. And then over time, we added another one. And then after a certain amount of time, that original BDR that was doing outbound business prospecting became an account executive. And so we hired 3 more BDRs through that process. And we just kind of layered the system together where we had no inbound leads. We had no marketing channels. We had no content. We had no demand gen programs. All that stuff came later. We were purely doing outbound. And so we just built it really mechanically based on how much business we were closing and how much, and if we could afford to hire these individuals to do the outbound calling, to set meetings and optimize the time of the people that had enough experience to actually close these accounts. And it was a very organic and slow process, but we learned so much from these people. And now we're at that stage where it's a more mechanical, coin-operated sales type process, but it's built on that original idea.
Yeah, we had a very similar experience with BDRs, and after a couple of years, them graduating, and we started also introducing some industry experience. So now we have like guys that have sold in consumer packaged good companies and women that have started their own consumer packaged good brands that are actually bringing some of the content and the education piece to the process as well, and it's been really good. But yeah, again, like curious people that they're just gonna hit the phone and yeah, get you those conversations.
The first person we had never wore shoes in the office. Like, this really strange, character that kind of meandered through a bunch of different careers, but was smart, clever, curious, and just wanted, like, fearless about calling people, because that's one of the toughest things to find initially. And so now he wears shoes.
Slightly different path for us.
Yeah.
Even today, it's mainly founder, i.e. me driven. I'm usually sort of driving the enterprise sales at this point. The other side of that is I've pretty much removed myself from the rest of the operations, so relying on our other management to do that. My approach today is really collaborative. So we actually partner with a number of companies in Canada. The credit bureaus are sort of the large players in consumer finance. So we partner with TransUnion. And, a lot of my pitch now at the enterprise level is actually including them in the pitch, because together we actually have a much more powerful offering. And that means a lot. They're a 50 to 100-year-old company and very well established. So when I'm sitting in front of a Rogers or a Bell or a TELUS and they're at the table, we sort of tag team those conversations, and that sales pitch becomes a lot simpler.
Yeah, I'm really bearish on BDRs. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're unnecessarily. If you guys got, how many of you guys have enjoyed an email pitch that you've got from some like 21-year-old just out of school saying, "Why haven't you answered my email yet?" I don't know. I'm frustrated by the whole thing. I mean, today we do have them. We do have them. I like to think that they're doing more than just annoying people with email and calls, but are using multiple modalities. I mean, including the Viewed It product. We use his product to do video and stuff, which is interesting. But I think the future is frankly less sales driven, and I think it's more marketing and customer success driven. Right. So my goal is to actually build a small sales team, like really small and elite and super well paid. I'd love to never have a gajillion reps. But I do believe in the power of marketing to build a strong category and to bring in that pull. I think content marketing works really well. I think the best marketing, though, comes from your customers. So like my first executive hire is always head of customer success. I think it's, once you have a few customers, you got to take really good care of them and make sure they're generating value. And they end up becoming your marketing engine. And the good news is, like, a head of customer success in the early days is also actually pretty good on sales calls and pretty effective in webinars. And why? Because they know about customer value. That's what everyone wants to hear about. They want to hear about how you made money for people.
The only thing I'd say is it's really difficult to have someone in customer success if you don't have any customers, right? So you still have, the only reason we started with BDRs is we didn't have any marketing, we didn't have any customers, so we needed to do something to find people. So yeah, but I agree. There is a depreciation in the effectiveness of cold calling and cold emailing, right? And we can actually thank marketing automation in part for that. It's the victim of its own success, right? 1994, a gentleman I love to hate to love, Mr. Vaynerchuk, who I'm sure a lot of you have. I was in Hong Kong last week and he spoke, and he said his mailing list of 250,000 people had an open rate of 97%. And now we celebrate an open rate of like 2%, maybe less. So Thank you, Eloqua, for automating that part of the process. But anyways, it still is effective. You just have to do it in crazy volumes, and it's timing, it's cadence, it's context. It has to be personalized. It just has to be so much better. It can't be templated emails and that type of shit.
Now, we sort of talked about a bunch of things now. Product isn't static. So you have existing customers. How do you take, what they sort of think they want and convert that into new product that you can then go ahead, or service, and sell them and keep the relationship going and expand that existing base?
Ask them if they'll pay for it.
I think in our case, we actually made our head of partnerships, which once we onboard a customer, I'll bring my head of partnerships in, and he'll really handle the onboarding. He's also our head of product. So what the telecoms or the credit card companies are saying is sort of making its way into our pipeline pretty fast.
Cool. That was faster than I was expecting. Okay, that's good.
So what is the riff on that?
No, it's okay. We'll move forward. We talked about that too. So in sort of the new IT world, it's a lot of usage and consumption based, and you guys are in that too. How have you found sort of your old traditional, as you called them, Mark, sort of coin operated salespeople able to shift into selling a new service or new model, and their compensation? How are you sort of managing that out?
So sorry, how are we managing the comp?
Comp for your salespeople in sort of a non-traditional license model and a sort of a usage consumption model, or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, we every time we add sort of consumption elements to the model, the customers come back and say, we actually don't like that because we want something predictable. So everyone says they only want to pay for what they use, but I mean, ultimately, if you're selling to the enterprise, they need to be able to predict, right? They want to be able to know what they're going to pay every month or every quarter. So, I mean, in our case, we actually work pretty hard to get everything in terms of monthly recurring revenue model, in which case the compensation is a lot easier. Like we pay for recurring revenue. We pay a lot more commission for that than we pay for sort of one-time services or, that sort of thing. We have, I guess, your traditional model where you have a base compensation, and it really depends on the strata of the reps. So like Michael, I'm a big fan of not having one type of rep for all segments, right? So, these days in SaaS, I mean, you can sell to really everybody. You could sell to small companies and really big companies with the same general product, but you can't always do that with the same type of sales rep. So we call account executives, and they might have like a $65,000 base, and they could make $130,000 a year by hitting their target. And their quota is like $800,000 or something around that, somewhere between $600,000 and $900,000 a year, depending on their seniority. Then the next level, we have regional sales managers. They're going to have like an $80K base. They can make $160,000 essentially a year. And they're going to sell to more of the mid-market companies with 1,000 to 4,000. And then we have enterprise reps that work on really big deals with huge companies, and they can make more than $250,000 a year. And if these sound like big numbers to you, it's because they are, right? That's why sales is expensive, and so that's why I'm a fan of actually having a small sales team where hopefully everybody's making money, and making sure they've got tons of leads and lots of management support and whatnot, as opposed to, well, we have to hit this target. We need more bodies at it. Multiply the number of reps times quota equals big number. That sounds good. That doesn't actually work that well.
I think it's worth talking about the transition between, and maybe not, I don't know, but the transition between that educator, that learner, that really low-cost person that's going out finding leads, driving business, when you're basically $0 in revenue, and then finding that person that has an OTE of $150 a year, because to pay someone $150,000 a year, they have to be generating, at least that amount in that new business, obviously, to pay for themselves, and then they're not going to be paying for everybody else. And so there's this transitionary moment that you have to time effectively, because the problem that I found, being an engineer, building a sales organization, is that salespeople are really good at convincing you that they can sell your stuff. They're better at convincing you they can sell your stuff than they can actually sell your stuff, generally speaking. So we had
true.
a number of really highly paid, failed salespeople early on that we just weren't ready for. And I'm actually curious how you guys all went through that transition.
Painfully. So yeah, like when I was at Eloqua, I had to fire my entire sales team. And it was because I was an inexperienced manager. I didn't know what I was doing. I was lucky that I had a really great advisor who said, your sales reps aren't any good. And by the way, you don't know what you're doing. So get rid of all the sales reps. You need to learn about sales. He gave me all kinds of books to put me through sales training. And then I learned a lot better in terms of how to do sales. I started with much more, again, sort of entrepreneurial people. And then once you figure out the fit, I mean, then you can hire folks that are more, more experienced. But like I had a lot of success hiring my own customers. Like I would hire people I would look at who of my customers was managing me really well, managing us, and they would be really interested in what we were doing. And so, well, how about working for us? Because those are people with built-in passion for what it is that we did. So yeah, I'm a big fan of hiring my customers. I've had many angry phone calls from CEOs of my customers saying, WTF, like, you're my vendor and you're hiring my people. Like, what is going on? I won't hire your people, don't worry.
That's a backhanded slap. I'm not sure.
But that's the thing. Like both me and Michael are category creators, right? Like nobody's necessarily, 5 years ago was lying awake at night saying, I really need a video tracking app or an advocate marketing app, right? They were lying awake at night saying, how am I going to fill my funnel? How am I going to go in and convert all these leads? How am I going to make my number? How am I going to keep my job? Like, that's what they were lying awake at night. And it turns out that we might have a solution that could help them with that. So by hiring people with built-in passion for this category, for early customers, early adopter customers, that passion and that knowledge, because they actually worked with us, was really important. And that's more important than having somebody who, has been making their number for 10, 12 years, selling something that has a big brand behind them and all the resources, solution engineers, and yeah.
And that passion is why you, as a founder, are the best salesperson early on.
We haven't
yeah.
figured it out.
Yeah,
I mean, we just haven't figured it out. That's the answer to your question.
Early on, but
I'm
like
still doing it.
as reps though, like could you sell $2 or $3 million a year as a rep? I don't think I could.
I still am responsible for roughly 15% of the company's revenue to date.
Yeah, but you're just the closer. Yeah, you're not managing the relationships.
Well, just early big accounts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I say I don't think if I was just put in a pure enterprise sales role, like I don't think I could sell $2 million a year of my software. I'm not good enough. I'm not disciplined enough. And you can see me, I'm half crazy, right? Like you wouldn't buy from me either.
I don't know, man. You might be discounting yourself.
I agree and I disagree. I think it just depends on the stage of your business. I mean, for us, I think
Want to try?
the large enterprise will sort of feed off of. It's kind of to your earlier point about being bored in their jobs. That they'll feed off the passion. So it does work for us, and it still works today. I don't know about your experience.
Yeah, no, I think I'd echo everything that's been said, but I think the biggest thing is just make sure that you can keep them motivated. So aside from compensation, which is obviously something you want to make sure they could reach their goals, but closers like to close, right? So, or salespeople like to close. So you just gotta make sure your sales process is there's something there that they can kind of run with. Make sure you were able to close some sales. So I think founders closing early and closing the first few deals makes a lot of sense. And then you can bring some and help them. Don't just expect them to do it themselves. You have to coach them through it and initially, because if they can't close stuff, first off, they won't make enough money to keep them motivated, but they also will get really bored.
Yeah. So I think we're going to close up now. This is a great finish and a great team. So just as we were going through, I was trying to take some notes on some sort of keywords of what came out. So, first one is sort of knowledge of your customer. Go talk to them, engage with them. Price, you own it. So go out and manage it. Know your client's goals and get them there. They're really good at telling you what they want. You have to build what they need. Be that contrarian. Learn from your reps, whether they are, the $350,000 person or the person just doing mass amounts of outbound calls. Continue to be fearless and be passionate.
Yeah, good summary.
Good summary.
That's all we got.
Thank you.